Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pass the Noise, the podcast that serves as an open forum discussion. We just throw out some topics or a topic, and we just have an open forum discussion about it. We are thankful that you're here. We welcome you, and we also ask that you participate. You can participate by putting comments in the comment section, or you can call in. I'll put a call-in link in the comment section shortly. You can come on, make your voice heard, your opinions. We are not looking for your agreement. We're just looking for your involvement and your engagement. So we certainly thank you for that. I'm your host, our co-host, Elder Michael Hightower, joined as always by Apostle T.B. Walker. Apostle, how are you doing tonight?
I am fantastic, fantastic, Elder. How about you?
I'm doing great. There's always seems to be just stuff going on in the world. The world we live in is constantly turning into the news cycle.
Absolutely
What's going on. And so tonight, let's start. I mean, we have a number of topics that we could go to, but let's start with Kanye West.
Okay.
And recent comments. He's made too many recent comments to even list, but he's made a significant number of recent comments that ruffle some feathers and really cause him some heartache, and it's all over the news right now. But the thing about him is this is not the first time that he said something that's controversial, whether it was
right.
something he pulled at the Grammys or some other things that he said. So he seems like be almost addicted to the attention you get from saying something that's sort of out there, if you will. And of course, if you have money, you're not crazy, you're eccentric, right? So people have sort of treated him like some kind of warped genius or something, and
right,
and that sort of accepted. That's just Kanye being Kanye, but not this time. So let's take a look at some of the comments that he made, and then let's get into it. These are comments he made about George Floyd.
Okay.
The family of George Floyd is considering legal action after Kanye West made, quote, false statements about the manner of Floyd's death.
The artist, who now goes by Ye, attempted to link Floyd's death to fentanyl.
The day when he died, he said a prayer for, 8 minutes. Mm-hmm. He said a prayer for 8 minutes. They hit him with the fentanyl. If you look, the guy's knee wasn't even on his neck like that.
Yeah, so conspiracy theories are not new. I mean, people are still investigating the Kennedy assassination,
right.
The Grassy Knoll, and Oswald didn't act on his own. So conspiracy theories is something that we just love. We love a mystery, or we don't really know what happened. I think in this case, this is sort of celebrity culture striking again. Like, I don't even understand why you're dredging it up, other than to sort of make some comment about George Floyd, the person. I mean, what happened to him, to me, my take, it's clear what happened to him.
Right.
Whatever he was doing or might have been doing, the proximate cause of his death was a knee on his neck for 9 minutes. I mean, the rest of his life and his lifestyle may have been factors that contributed in some way, but he still doesn't die without that 9 minutes of showing his knee on his neck.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, listen, the facts are facts. I think there's a couple things that, that always stick out to me. One of the things that I look at, and I think people oftentimes forget, is that Kanye is, Kanye suffers from depression. I think he's got bipolar disorder. He had a horrible car accident, some time ago. And I think there's been a lot of effects. And I think the strange thing is that Kanye is a celebrity, but I wonder why people listen to Kanye, knowing that he's got some other issues. He was, he was admitted into the hospital with a nervous breakdown, that he's had in his relationship. So a part of that, like you said, there's something about the celebrity, the aura that people even give credence to a guy like Kanye, who has said some wacky, off the wall, absolutely not in the ballpark of reality things.
Right.
And I think for some reason, this has struck a nerve with people. And for some reason, people are now saying, hey, I don't like what this guy's saying. And I wonder why, it took this long for people to really hear Kanye and move away from the idea that, man, like, wow, he's such a wonderful genius. And he, from a musical standpoint, Kanye's done some things. He's made some money. He could be considered a genius, in his field. But, Kanye West works on the conspiracy theorist thinking, and I think that's where we are in America. The truth of the matter is why this even gets any play, why this isn't just a thing where people are saying, man, who cares about that? Well, we're not even talking about that. Why that's on covers of magazines and why companies are coming out is because for once, the reality is Kanye's voice actually has finally struck a nerve. He finally said some things that even members of his community can't stand with any longer.
But isn't that what always happens, right? There's always a line and a point, but once you go beyond that point, you've lost the support you had because you're like, I can't even go with you there. Like that, now you're beyond where I can go. And I think that people who are doing that don't see it. Like they don't know where the line is. They think the line is wherever they say the line is. I can do whatever I want. I can say whatever I want. I'm Kanye. I'm going to do my thing. But without even realizing that this is a touchy subject for a lot of people. I mean, whether regardless of what side you fall on, this is a very touchy subject.
Absolutely.
And his weighing in on it gratuitously was not appreciated. Not appreciated by George Floyd's family, not appreciated by other people. Like, what are you talking about? Like, just the way that he presented that in himself just wasn't a good look. I mean, it sounded ignorant. Like, I mean, this has all been, adjudicated in court. And again, I mean, with his, I didn't know George Floyd. So I don't know what all his lifestyle was. Apparently, the allegation is that he was a drug user. But again, all the other things he might have been doing, he might have had some other condition. But he would not have died that day if he hadn't had his neck kneeled on for 9. He just wouldn't have.
Well, and listen, we actually saw the video. So the idea that, and hey, they shot him up with the fentanyl and his knee wasn't on his neck like that. And all of those things, in the end of the day, I think that's a part of the mania. I think that's a part of, Kanye's mindset and what he's kind of gone through. And even the idea that he would have a voice, that, with all the incendiary things that he has said, even leading to the interview that he had with Drink Champs, interview that he had with Piers Morgan, interview with Tucker Carlson, the backflips he did with Trump, the White Lives Matter, all of those things that he did, for some reason people were still clamoring to let's get an interview until he said something that they finally just couldn't stand. And then all of a sudden people kind of turned. But I don't know if they turned completely because there's parts of what he said that they like. There's a hate speech that is there that touches a nerve in certain communities that, that allows Kanye to, of course, stay afloat. This should be the swan song, right? This should be the thing that sinks the raft, but it's not going to because there's another part of this that's like, okay, you kind of hated on George Floyd. We don't like that. But you did say this about the Jews. And that brings you back in the game. That's such a strange, connection.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's some of it is that people see what they want to see and hear what they want to hear. But I think the other part of it is, as long as you say something that I agree with, something, it's part of the time, I'm good with you. I'll ignore the other stuff, but you really hit the nail on the head with this other thing. I think there's a crazy sort of willful blindness that people operate in with regard to him. I mean, he wasn't just, sort of just bopping around thriving. Like he had tens of millions of dollars worth of business relationships with huge companies. I mean,
absolutely,
multinational companies. So they're, entertaining him and sort of they've ignored some things he said in the past, and in order to do business with him. So it's a strange thing, but I guess given the world we live in, not really strange. It's sort of like this is what we do now. We like, unless you say something like totally outrageous. And nowadays, I don't even know what that would be. Like that line is moving further and further away from where you would say, oh, "I'm done with you now."
Well, you're right. I mean, Kanye is really. I mean, listen, this whole thing is really, I think it's really about us. What Kanye's doing is one thing, but what it says a lot about us. It says about, Kanye is really just an offshoot of what we've come out of with Trump and the idea of fake news and the idea that facts really don't matter anymore. But it doesn't matter whether you can prove it. It doesn't matter whether, that's really real, because there's still some people, everybody didn't really look at everybody. This wasn't 100% turnaround against even what he said with George Floyd. There's some people that said, we thought that. I saw some comments where people were saying, we thought that. And here's the interesting thing is there is an alt-right that was already saying that very same thing. He didn't die. Chauvin didn't kill him. He was a drug addict. And so it's an interesting connection between Kanye having this great love for his people and talking about, what's going on with the oppressed, his oppressed people being African Americans in this country. And on the same hand, he's kind of trumpeting the very same things that the alt-right has actually been saying about Chauvin the whole time. Get him out of there. He didn't kill this guy. He was a drug addict the whole time. What killed him was fentanyl. So he's actually trumpeting the very same things that are anti his people. And that's really interesting that he's still being held up, that he's not canceled. I guarantee you, he's not going to get canceled. There are going to be people who are going to lift him up and find some way to wave the Kanye flag. He's going to lose business. And it's in the losing business that I suspect that people are going to rally around and say, see, he was right. The system is rigged. And no, maybe the system, maybe you just can't do hate speech. Maybe hate speech is the problem. Not that the system is rigged. Not that some big Jewish cabal has come out against it. Maybe people are looking and saying, hey, that's called anti-Semitic. Those are anti-Semitic remarks. That's not cool.
Right.
And facts matter. Facts do matter. And I hope we get back to understanding that facts matter, because what he said about George Floyd is just really kind of an offshoot of what we've been experiencing in this country.
Yeah, that's true.
That conspiracy theory is way more.
Yeah. We have a comment?
Sure.
Wait a minute, this is comment. I think Kanye's rant speaks a lot about us. Yep, you just said that. We also thrive on the foolishness of the Kanyes of the world. 100%. We live through that. And there are people who agree with what he said. It's like, I wish I could say that. I wish I had a platform where I could go and do that. So he's definitely going to have people who have his back and are supporting, all the things that he's said and done. I think that's sad, but it's still, sad but true. And again, with he did the whole thing with that. It's like crying for attention. Like he did the whole thing with the White Lives Matter T-shirts. And there's some other stuff he said. Let's take another look at some other stuff. Who's a comment? A comment from Clarice. Our people are actually arguing and debating with each other over the foolish things that he says. The things that he says are definitely causing debate. And people, if you go on places where people can make comments, that people are like, oh, you got to leave him alone. Oh, why are you not supporting him? Why we can't let him be canceled? We can't let him be this. We can't let him be that. So, yeah, there's in our community, there's a debate about whether or not he should be canceled.
Well, let's face it. I mean, the reality is, I think that in the end of the day, Kanye is not creating this narrative that he's spewing, right? The truth of the matter is, much of what Kanye is speaking is coming from some of the dinner table conversations. There are some issues that African Americans have had with other ethnic groups, other minority groups in this country. And some of that stems from, racism that's in America, whether that racism has been taught, whether that racism is inherent, even in blacks in this country. And so when he says what he says about the Jews, the reason why the hackles didn't come up, the hackles certainly came up with Jews, but it didn't come up with other African Americans, because secretly, let's face it, these are conversations that have been held. And I think that people are loath to kind of tear them down, because in some ways we're being confronted with some of our own hate speech that we've secretly said, those Jews, how they do. So the idea of like they own everything, and people didn't say, where'd that come from? No, like, my uncle used to say that all the time, or cousin Bobby used to say that. That's just the reality. And I think Kanye is really saying some things that we really kind of like, shh, don't say that. We weren't supposed to speak out of turn, and he's given us a chance to hear how crazy some of it is, how conspiratorial some of it is, and what hate looks like. It doesn't just hate speech doesn't just come from, some guy in the Klan, some white supremacist neo-Nazi group. It also can come from the guys at the family reunion who are also speaking that same hate. And we've kind of embraced that side. We didn't like what he said about George Floyd, but we gave him a life vote because he came back and said something that resonates with many, many people in the African-American community. And I think we've got to grapple with that feeling that we've had with the Jewish community, with the Asian community, with other communities that we interact with.
I mean, yeah, because it seems like we have an issue with every other minority community in the country.
Absolutely.
And
I mean, if we can't be the kings in this country, we still got to be the kings of the minorities.
Yeah, it's just, but it is strange. I mean, it's why do minorities have beef with each other to begin with? Like you're a minority. Like you should be coming together, pooling resources so that you can, people can be lifted up, raised up, whatever you want to call it. But as long as you have inner fighting within minorities, nobody wins. The winner is the majority, whatever the majority is, because they are controlling the narrative. They get to say, you see those people are doing. Why can't you do it? This is happening. Why? What's wrong with you guys? So pitting one minority against another works for them. It doesn't work for us. It has not worked for us. Whether you're talking about the Jewish community, Asian American community, whatever other community you're talking about, it has not ended well for us in any of those instances because that it is not helpful.
Absolutely.
So we have some more comments.
Okay.
Willie May says, many of the millennials are applauding Kanye. They refuse to look at the negative fallout. They don't see any negative fallout because he's still standing. He's still out there. He's still doing interviews. He's doing interviews probably while we speak. Doing interviews. He's on magazine covers. He's getting print. He's on the news. He's on CNN and stuff. He's probably talking about him. So to them, that's a victory. Like to them, truly, any publicity is good publicity. The only thing that's bad is if people are not talking about you. So to them, he's a hero because he's only 45 or 45ish.
Right.
So to them, he's one of them. He's sort of a hero. He's saying things that they, like you talked about, saying things they want to say, saying things they believe, and he's just sort of same with Trump. Trump is saying things people want. Trump was saying things people want to say, but just had the good sense to say, you can't really say that in public. So he's sort of doing the same type of thing.
Sure. And in order for things to change, unfortunately, you have to have this. In order for things to really change, those things that you've been secretly saying, racism stays. If we, publicly state that, I don't see color. It doesn't matter. But like at the dinner table, if we really say, don't bring a white girl home, don't bring a black girl home. If secretly we say that, but openly we're different, racism and all those things stay. We're at a real pivotal point where I think these things are coming out. And, we may not be the people to change it. But I think this millennial generation is going to also have to hear themselves. They've got to hear that we want peace, but we want it through hate. They've got to hear it. They've got to hear that we don't need facts, that we're going to live in conspiracy. How do you prove that he didn't? Tell me that they didn't poison the water. So if that's how they're going to live, they need to hear it for change to happen. That I'm not living in facts. I'm living in a fictional world of my own creation, a hate that I can make up and even target people that actually are in the same boat with me.
But they're not hard to find, right? You can go on the internet and find any belief you have. You can go on the internet and find a group that's like, that's what we believe. So if you have some, even though no matter how crazy or far out there it may be, you can find people who will, support that and will, say, yeah, you're right. Yeah, what about this? Yeah, what about that? So you can always find those splinter groups or whatever.
Right.
The splinter groups are becoming bigger and bigger as people sort of lean to that sort of stuff, the conspiracies.
Sure.
They're against me. I can't make it because of this person or that group, or they took all the jobs, or they're taking all this. So it's like it's been an ongoing thing. But like to your point, it's got to come out and tells Alvin openly,
absolutely,
really address it, not sort of play with it. Then you're going to keep having the same dynamics, especially with our communities and other communities. You're going to have the same sort of tension and sort of suspicion and not trusting. You're going to have that same thing until these things are like, okay, this is what we've really been saying. This
is blatant racism.
Yeah.
This is blatant hate speech. Yeah. And listen, unless we hear it, and unfortunately we got to see it, with everything that we had in, was it Charleston, when they, when the guy, the white supremacists with the march down there, was that West Virginia? Was it Virginia? When they were talking about we won't be replaced. I can't remember but you know, all of those racial issues that we had,
Yeah.
the marchers, the people who were worried about, you know, whites being replaced by Jews and whites being
Mm-hmm.
replaced by black people need to hear this. Everybody needs to hear what's going on. They need to see the likes. They need to see that I liked a comment like that, where someone was talking about the Jews and who they are and the evil. That I liked the idea that the Holocaust, you know, wasn't really real, and that the worst, that you know, Planned Parenthood is the real Holocaust, and that Holocaust was nothing. And you know, they need to hear themselves really look at real history, right, and decide to create a new narrative on history. And I think that that's what has to happen in order for change to occur. We probably are in a situation where we're not going to see change. We have to see the dirt first before we really get the vacuum out, because we're really kind of believing right now that the house is clean. So until you got to shake the rugs and, you know, and smack some of the cushions, you don't really know that the house is really filthy. Yeah. And Kanye West is really helping us smack the cushion to be able to say, brother, that's crazy. And there's a lot of people that's out there believing that. We can't follow that.
No, good point.
And he's being lifted up as a leader. You know,
absolutely.
Nipsey Hussle was a Crip. Nipsey got shot, and then all of a sudden it's like Nip was was a leader. I mean, huge funeral. You know, Nipsey gonna have a funeral. Nipsey had a funeral for the small body of work that he did. Like, never a #1 single, but somehow this Crip was somehow just, I mean, man, the stuff he was doing in the community. Now we've got a Kanye West that people are going to try to lift up as a new savior. Oh man, if they shot Kanye down, that's like Jesus. Listen, we're in a real serious bind when we start picking Crips and killers and Kanyes as our bannermen. I don't want to be, not mine. I can tell you right now, he don't represent me.
Yeah.
They don't represent me. Whack 100, they don't represent me.
Right. Oh man. Here's some more comments. Sean Fader, but at the end of the day, this man suffered from mental illness. I hate that we are watching someone fall apart before our very eyes without doing anything to help him. I mean, I understand that he's been diagnosed with mental health issues. Don't want to diminish that at all, but somehow he still managed to negotiate and operate within multi-million and multi-billion-dollar businesses. So, yeah, he might have some issues, but that is right. He can negotiate a contract to get his designs in a Gap, in other places, the Adidas and all these other companies he was doing business with, JP Morgan Bank. If he
set up a mega church overnight,
if you start a school, I mean, if he can do all that, then yes, he may have some mental health issues, but they're not preventing him from doing those things, and they shouldn't keep him from being able to talk like he has some sense. Like, you know, at some point, him or somebody's got to say, no, you can't do anybody who calls can't get an interview. Like, anyone who calls can't. Right. You can't talk for 3-4 hours straight if you have, you know, those kind of issues. So you shouldn't. You know, so there's got to be some personal accountability on that as well.
And we don't know if he was off his meds. And listen, it'd be easy. Whenever we see somebody, if somebody, like, you know, a brother kills a sister and they're like 8, 9 years old, they have to be crazy in our minds, because we can't imagine it just be evil, right? They got to be crazy. When Kanye says these things, he's got to be off his meds. Listen, there's nobody that said Kanye was off his meds. Kanye said he was not off his meds. So we would love to be able to wrap this in the fact that, like, he's crazy. He doesn't know what he's saying, but he does know what he's saying. And Kanye gave great factual, well, in his own mind, real. He didn't just say things. He gave backup. He gave his own thoughts. He used what he believed to be facts to connect those. And I think that you've got a guy who may be delusional, a guy whose points may have no merit whatsoever, but I don't think he can hide behind his bipolar disorder.
No, I don't think he can hide behind it either. I agree with that. More comments. He makes some good points, says Willie Mae. On his medication, he makes sense. Off of his medication, he sounds like a madman.
We just don't know when he's off his meds.
Yeah, that's actually makes him somewhat more dangerous, because one, you don't know, but B, because he makes sense on Monday, people still listen on Wednesday when he's talking complete nonsense. So you have sort of this dynamic where one day he's making good points and another day he's not. I've heard him talk, and I've heard him talk and make sense. I've heard him talk and make good points about a variety of things.
Right.
But I've also heard him ramble and talk stuff that you're like, I don't have no idea what is he talking about. So it's some of both, and unfortunately, if someone's going to be held up as a leader, then you can't have this. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, you wouldn't do that in any other part of your life. You wouldn't go to church. I don't know. Pastor's on his mention. I don't know what he's. I mean,
right.
You
Right.
wouldn't do that. Like I don't know if the boss was. I don't know if he's crazy or not. I keep working for him. Like no, we wouldn't do that. Like we only do it in certain parts of our life where we accept sort of like, yeah, you know what, he's a little wacky, but yeah, we good. I mean,
right.
No.
And it'd be different if Kanye was saying, "Listen, I'm not your leader." How many athletes have we tried to make role models who said, "Like, I'm not your role model. I just shoot, I shoot threes. I'm not a role model." Kanye's coming out was like, "Listen, other than Jesus is me. I'm the only one. I'm the only one who knows." So he's kind of he's taking the mantle on. Yeah. I don't think, I think Kanye has some issues, but I think that the issues are really with us. That we haven't turned our back. That we haven't turned away. That we haven't said enough is enough. So one of the ways that Kanye could get help is if people turn in the right direction. I think as long as we keep turning toward that light, come to the light. I think as long as we keep coming to Kanye's light, he's gonna keep on shining in that goofy way.
Yeah, yeah. More comments. Clarice says, "I ain't following him. I haven't read or heard his family chime in. That is who needs to step up and get him help." He does seem to sort of like be on his own. Like you see him, it's like there seems to be nobody around him, no nothing. Just he does seem to be like a lone wolf. I don't know if that's just the way he wants it, or if everyone's I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I agree. He just seems to sort of be out there on his lonesome.
Well, listen. It's part of. It's also part of the issue with mental illness. I don't know if it's mental illness all around the world, but definitely mental illness in our country. That he hasn't hurt anybody. So when that I deal with people who have children who are struggling with bipolar disorder, who have schizophrenia, but yet they haven't hurt anybody. So the parents want them to get help. They're really clamoring to try to find, but like everywhere they go, they're saying you can't commit him. He's just grown up. Can't make him take these medicines. You can't make him make this appointment. So unless he goes in on his own, there's nothing that can happen. Kanye's, that's part of this. He's grown, and so he may have some issues, but he's not dangerous in a way that anyone could probably corral him in and make him go anywhere. No,
I think the standards, you got to present a danger to yourself or others, like a real physical danger. You can't just be like, "Yeah, he's saying crazy things." It's got to be like, "No, he might hurt somebody or himself." So yeah, that's doesn't appear to be the case with him.
Dangerous to his finances.
Very dangerous to his own finances. William A. says, "Amen, Apostle, that needed to be said. He is not supposed to represent us." 100%. 100% right. And Clarice says, "That interview sounded very different from his interview with the Letterman Netflix show." Yeah, again, I've seen him do a number of interviews. I think it depends on the topic. I think some topics, for whatever reason, like he thinks that he knows something we don't know. He's got to show his genius off. It's just like, I think it depends on the questions he's asked. I mean, in this case, the clip we watch another clip in a minute. It was just sort of a free for all. They just started throwing stuff out and just sort of sitting back and talking. And so he was more like ranting and sort of like stream of consciousness. And I think that's where he gets into the most trouble. I think with a professional interviewer, they can sort of drive the interview rather than letting him just go off on a tangent. I think that helped him as well because Letterman's a professional interviewer.
Well, I'm assuming the clip you're talking about is going to be on Drink Champs.
Mm-hmm.
See, you know what? I think that a part of what you see with Letterman, what you see with Piers Morgan, and you talked about a professional interviewer that might be different from a Nori, is that you don't have this friendship, and B, you don't have people who are fawning to a certain extent. You're a genius. You're the man. So some of that makes it hard if Piers Morgan doesn't have a dog in that fight. They don't have, so I mean, if he's offended, they don't walk away saying, "I got to fix that," because I'm in the industry. No way. They're not going home and say, "Call Kanye and let him know that I didn't mean it. I didn't look like that because of him." You know, no, they don't care. And I
Yeah.
think part of what happens in his aura is that people really, they don't, I think they see him in such a godlike place that they don't necessarily chime in and do what they need to do to corral him. So he was kind of allowed to kind of run rampant.
And he did. Let's look at the clip, because he did exactly that. And this is actually 2 clips. But it's all in one. Like,
You hear about slavery for 400 years? For 400 years, that sounds like a choice. Like, you was there for 400 years and it's all of y'all? You know, like, it's like we're mentally in prison. I like the word prison because slavery goes too direct to the idea of blacks. It's like slavery, Holocaust Jews, slavery is blacks. Yeah. You know, like, because if you don't have the connections, you know, Trump had enough connections to make it into office, but he didn't have the Jewish media on his side, because the Jewish media was already aligned with an agenda with the left, with the Chinese. I had to learn, is like, that thing I said with DEFCON, that was like me going Trump, you know, level. Right. The only possible way that I could have won, that I'm gonna win, the only possible way is for me to early on call out the Jewish media this early, right? Because they'll play nice with you.
So part of it, you're always gonna get in trouble, right? The Anti-Defamation League is always gonna be on your door in 5 minutes when you start talking about the Jews or the Jewish people, or you start talking about one colossus that's you know, coming out. As soon as you do that, they're coming. As soon as you do that, they're coming. And that's the way they operate. Like, as soon as they hear something that they think is anti-Semitic, every Jewish organization chimes in. This needs to be an apology. It needs to be this. It needs to be that. It needs to be this other thing. And you know, he was just crazy ranting in this interview. Said a lot of crazy things. I don't know what he was thinking. But one of the things he said was that I can say anti-Semitic things and Adidas won't drop me. And he said, now what? So now what? Now they dropped him. So I mean, like, in your mind, I think sometimes in your mind, when you get that big and you have that much money and that much influence in your world, that you actually believe. He actually believed it. I can say whatever I want. They're not going to drop it. I'm kind of not going to drop it. I think he actually, part of him, believed that, because that was not the first time he said something like that and nothing happened. So he's operating off of, wait a minute, that's my system. They didn't do anything. Why did they do something this time? That's a good question. You know, why would they do something this time when they didn't do things the other time? Why didn't black people cancel him when he said, oh, no, slavery was a choice? Like, that was a year, 4 years ago when he made those comments. Like, we didn't do anything. Like, after that, he still went on with the Gap and with Adidas, with all these other deals. Black people continue to buy his products and continue to download his music and support him in all sorts of ways, even though what he said was completely just, it's not even a bad take. It's just, it's moronic on a level. Like, what?
Yes.
What are you talking about? I mean, that kind of stuff is what we're talking about. Is just like, we just can't stand. Like, but it did.
Well, if you want to talk about canceling, I mean, you know, he said something about the idea that he could say this and Adidas wouldn't cancel him, and Adidas proved him wrong, right? But but there's a part of this that he's, like, I can say this with amongst black people, on Drink Champs, and say what I said about slavery being a choice, right on TMZ. I can say what I say on Drink Champs about George Floyd, and here's what he knew: black people won't cancel me. That's there's a real, he said what he said about the Jews. The Anti-Defamation League came out. Companies got together and said, no, that's hate. That's wrong. That's delusional, right? So in a lot of ways, he's really, doesn't he sound a lot like Trump? Didn't Trump say, listen, I can shoot somebody right down, I forgot what that was.
Main Street.
Main Street, yeah. And nobody would say anything, right?
Nothing happened.
In reality, this is kind of, again, that alt-right speech. This is really what we thought with Trump was crazy. Trump said something about the Jews didn't stand with him like they should have. They didn't support him. Remember? I don't know if you remember that. He recently said that. as he was at the Wailing Wall. He said something very similar to that very, very same thing. You guys didn't stick with me like you should have. I suspect that we're, as crazy as it sounds, we're just hearing many of these alt-right talking points. They're just, it's as weird as it is, they're coming out of the mouth of Kanye West. And I don't think it looks as in the same way that it looked with Donald Trump. We cocked our heads to the right, but we said, okay, you know, we kind of expect that from you. This just coming out of Kanye West's mouth. It's just like, this is the wrong puppet. It doesn't seem right. White Lives Matter is something that we would expect if Trump and Melania walked down, you know, okay, Trump's making a statement. You know, he put the red hat on and the shirt, you know, and we would say, that's crazy, but that's Donald Trump. This one is Candace Owens, and this one is, you know, we talk about Kanye West. And I think those are the same points we just came through in the years with Trump. Same type of fantastical thinking, same type of conspiratorial thinking, you know, and theories that were put out there were saying, and people are saying that, and everybody says it. And we kind of looked and said, you know, maybe he's right. And maybe that guy isn't from America. He put out all those things. This is Kanye really kind of talking just like a Trumper. It just looks weird because we're not expecting it. We didn't expect the MAGA hat guy to be a Kanye West.
We did not.
We thought it might be some nerd, right? Where people look and say, okay, he looks okay, Christian guy, maybe him over there, right? But not Kanye, who started his own church and he's, you know, Bishop West. Right. We never expected it would come from that guy. But he checks off all the marks. He checks off all the boxes.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, strange, fascinating, and not scary, but sort of like bizarre, is that I think when people reach a certain level of worldly success, you get to the point where more success means nothing, right? You reach the point where it's like another million is nothing, another whatever. I'm doing it because I don't have anything else to do, sort of like, but I don't need to do it. I think they start flailing around, like starting to find some meaning to this is all there is, like just being rich and eating steak and lobster every day, and I can have whatever I want. That's it. Like, I think that sort of messes with people's minds in ways that they don't expect. As you're going up to that point, they think, if I only had one more, if I only had one more million, if I only had one more, and then you get this, like, and now what?
Yeah. I think you look at Elon Musk. You kind of see a weird factor that's beginning to come in to a guy who was a genius, who was a kind guy, and you know, wow, he's nothing like corporate America. And then all of a sudden, there's a shark in here because you know, making all those other things, like you said, there's a level here that I think people go off the rails that we may not see. We may not be checking it out. You see it even in actors. There's a certain place where they go where, like, you look at an interview and it's like, that guy doesn't seem like anything like the guy that I saw in this movie, you know, 5 years ago. Now that he's a multi-gazillionaire and success is already there and there's nothing else to climb for, man, there's a weirdo factor that starts creeping in. And I think some of that is that danger of, you know, wanting to be wealthy, that we are being, you know, biblically, even from a biblical perspective, we're being warned about, that we can't imagine. Like, what could be wrong? And you start seeing that at a certain place, man, people's minds start changing.
I think absolutely. I think you mentioned it during the Live at 5. You mentioned the scripture, he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver. The thing that you love in this world that are not spiritual cannot be satisfied. If you love, you know, whatever, you'll never be set. You can never get enough. I think we sort of act like when we don't have what we consider to be enough, that there's more that we can get that will make us satisfied. You keep doing it, do it. But the Bible's already said, if you're never really going to be satisfied as long as that's the thing that you love. But we still sort of keep falling into that same trap. And then we found people who are falling into the same trap and wonder why we have, you know, issues. So kind of strange, but I mean, it's sort of the world we live in right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens from here. Be interesting to see what ways, if any, the relationship between the Black communities and Jewish communities changes, gets better or worse, or just whatever. That's going to be interesting to me.
I don't know if it's going. You know, I'm not sure if that this is fractured anything in the Black community. I think this is Kanye West. Now, here's the thing: Kanye West is speaking for a lot of people, and when I say fracturing, I mean I don't think it's going to change. Whatever fracturing is already there, it just stays the same. It's just being exposed that there is this thought that somehow, you know, what he spoke about, you know, Jews are running this and the Jews are behind this. Interestingly enough, that's not a new trope for Jews in this world. They've kind of had that biblically. They've kind of spoken that they would have that everywhere they go. This is really a self-fulfilling prophecy that's going to be there no matter what happens. And so some of that is there. But I think at the end of the day, the relationship is going to remain the same. I think that struggle that we have in this country and the racism that's kind of built in, it divides without you having to do anything. Without you having to do anything. We have a different perspective on the police. We have a different perspective on, you know, which is why we have the same issues with Asians, I suspect. It's because there's a different view on how we're treated versus how they're treated. Now, whether it's true or not, that's not the point. I think the view is what brings about the problem.
Yeah, let's the interesting point. Let's there's the comment, and then let's talk about the Black and Asian communities, how they interact. Chavez says Kanye really believed that he was responsible for the success of these companies. The success of these companies was already established, which was the reason he wanted to connect with them in the first place. He has definitely adopted a Trump mindset.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you know what? I think that what Kanye is doing is that this is the new confidence. I think what we're seeing here is, you know, coming from Donald Trump again, that we've gotten, here's what the new view of confidence is. It has no view of humility. It has no care of hurting other people. It only desires to get to the top no matter what. And it assumes, confidence assumes I should be there. It should be me. So who else could say, listen, I'm the only one who can fix it. There's no one else that can fix it, right? We looked at that and everybody didn't leave the room. They were kind of like, okay. You know, Kanye said, I've got $9 billion. You know, and people looked and said, he's got $9 billion. Now, nobody checked it. Of course, Kanye doesn't have $9 billion. Trump said he had a gazillion. Nobody checked it. Turned out he didn't have a gazillion. But they said it. And what they're showing us, if I tell you that, you'll believe anything. And what they're just showing us is that, like, you want to see how the Antichrist comes in here, man. We're primed. The world is primed and ready because it's ready to believe a lie. Absolutely, it's ready to believe a lie. Kanye. Okay, so now it comes out. Kanye's got like about 110 million. Listen, that's still rich folk problems. That's amazing. There's still a lot of money, but that's not $9 million. That's not $9 billion, right? But at the end of the day, Kanye all over the internet. He's got $9 billion. He's the richest man in this. I mean, you know, he's the most powerful black man in, you know, in America. And and then all of a sudden it's like, no, he doesn't have that. That's not true. And here they took this away, and they took this away, and we're really ready to believe a lie, especially because we worship fame and money. Kanye's there because he's famous and he has money, not because he's that smart. He's famous and he has money.
No, for sure. He's famous. He's got money, and he has a talent for certain things. I mean, he has a talent for it, and like a lot of our culture, and not just ours, but across the world, we attribute people having a talent at something as them being good or moral people. He can hit 40 home runs. He's got to be a good guy. He's this. He's got to be a good. So we transfer that to their character. Right. Did you hear his song? His last album? There wasn't one bad track on the whole thing. He's got to be a good guy.
He must be doing something right.
Yeah, no, nothing. One has absolutely nothing to do with the other. But getting back to your point about the blacks and black community, Asian American communities, it's been a long history. I mean, obviously we've been here for a while. The Asian Americans have been here for a while. It wasn't always contentious. It's sort of more contentious now. It was at one point, you know, Asians and blacks worked together because they were both oppressed. They were both minorities. They both needed to pool some resources to get some things done. So there was sort of a feeling of community. What's interesting is the way that the media portrays the relationship between African Americans and Asians. especially during the pandemic and that period afterwards, when you had that that rash of attacks on Asian Americans.
Sure.
Cause let's look at some of this footage of exactly that. There's no.
Okay.
We'll just look at it. So here we go.
Sure.
So, we just see it's racist attacks, and you see all the things that they show is black people attacking Asian Americans. Now, this happened. They didn't make it up. But what you show on the news of all the things that happens, people think this is all that's happening. This is it. This is the thing. And these are horrible attacks. Listen, nobody's vouching for this craziness where people are being punched in the face and attacked and shot. No, I mean, this is crazy. The guy comes up and just beats on him. I mean, nobody's for that. And I'm not saying that, that because they're showing this, you have to show 10 white people beating up Asian Americans. I'm not saying that either. I'm saying this is deliberate to me. My take is this footage, this sort of coverage, deliberate. You see here, six guys and mugshots are all black. I mean, this is I think sort of the way that Asians and black people in this country have been pitted against each other really for a very long time. I think it started back in the 80s when you had the model minority theory, where not theory, but myth. It's a myth. So the myth is Asians don't commit crimes. They're all smart. They're all good at STEM. They all work hard. And then so they held them up and said, how come black people can't do the same thing they're doing and sort of achieve the way they've achieved? And even the Asians are saying, that's a myth. And I mean, that's all you've done is sort of made us into some artificial people who are just like, we're all good at this. We all do this. We're all this. We're all that. We're not. No group is all anything. Like you have black criminals, you have Asian criminals gang. I mean, they have Chinese gangs. You have you have people who are whatever in all the groups. But the only people who have an interest in sort of us being at odds is the people, the majority. And we don't have an interest. That doesn't help us. It doesn't help Asian Americans. So that's my take on sort of what we saw coming out of that whole those attacks. Again, we're not supporting those attacks. That's reprehensible,
right?
In every way possible. But it was portrayed as it's just blacks committing violence on Asians.
Well, I think a lot of what also happens is, and especially like I don't know if you remember during the Rodney King riots. A lot of Korean owners had their stores burned down. They were on the roof with guns having to protect. And obviously this was kind of a Korean versus black situation there. You see a lot of that in the black communities, in urban communities where Asian store owners are there. And so I think that what happens is, there's also myths that go on there as well in terms of, they're owning the stores and they're in our neighborhoods, but they own all of the stores. They own the shoe store. They own the corner store. And so I think all of those things, and, the government, when they come here, the government gives them this huge check to kind of get everything started. And so that myth there, racism in this country kind of pits minorities against each other. Why can't you do what they do? Why can't you own like me? And so I think all of that together, since the minority can't fight the majority, we fight each other. We fight each other. We don't look at the Arab guy who owns the store. We don't know how he got it, but we just assume because of the myth. As soon as he came here from Yemen, they gave him a $15,000 check to get started and to go into the hood. And that's exactly it. So we forget, like, he's lives upstairs. He and his four kids and his wife, they live above the building. They're working 20. That's why the store is open all the time. So we forget all of those things that are there. And the myths really kind of begin to form a sort of hatred within the mind of the community that you own the store that I live in and I can't even own it. And they just gave it to you.
Yeah, I experienced a lot of this firsthand when I lived in DC for 10 years in school, and I lived there. And the corner stores, right? Even if you had 10 and only in Queens own 2 of them, they don't own the stores, and the prices are too high, and they don't treat us right, and they don't respect us. So it was like sort of built in, and they didn't trust us, and they're looking at us and making sure we're arrested. So it's sort of a crazy thing. But when you think about it, like who wants to have that sort of strife in your own neighborhood? Like, I'm just going across the street to get an iced tea and some pretzels, and I don't, and we have this exchange where I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and there's all this other stuff going on. It's counterproductive, and it's sort of like when you, like you said, a lot of it is like the myths, like
that's what does it.
They magically just have all this stuff, and I guess they're driving Rolls Royces and whatnot. And I knew a guy whose family owned a business. They drove a van. They lived above the store. They worked hard. He went from from school. He went to work in his family's store, and the store, like that was the way that they made a living. Apparently, his dad couldn't speak English, and so he decided to open a store rather than try to go to school and do something else. That's his choice. But I think the myth sort of you walk in with the myth, and you sort of like there's an interaction based on that. And then they have the myth of black people stealing, and they trust them and not that. And so you have this constant everyday back and forth in the community where you have this tension, and it just makes no sense.
Absolutely, racism is a huge problem in America, especially in terms of our, I think in terms of our entertainment, because in some ways, that's also the picture of us that they get to see, right? We're going to be the criminal. We're going to be the drug dealer in the movie. We're going to be the guy with the gun. In some ways, that's who they see. So this racism that's in America, that's already here, really, it's already established that, because the lines have been drawn. So there is no fight between the hood over here and this suburban sector over there. But there can be a fight within the same grouping, the same neighborhood. As long as you live here, work here, I can fight you. But the people over there are too far for me to fight. I think that's part of what brings about this issue with people in our community that have really been, I think, by and large, helpful, a blessing, an addition to the community. They're part of the community. Asians, Koreans, Arabs, they're all a part of the community. What a weird thing is that as we experience the same self-hatred in our community, it's going to spread. This isn't just a matter of like, do black people really hate Asians? No. Do black people really hate Arabs? No. Listen, here's the problem. Black people have an issue of self-hatred. That's what racism has done in this country. It's brought about self-hatred. We can hate ourselves. And if you don't love yourself, you're not going to look at other minorities and say, hey, brother, no way. You're going to see an enemy, an adversary. Because if you look at people who look like you as an adversary, if your songs are about shooting them and raping them and killing them and removing them, what are you going to think about someone else who is an immigrant or who's someone who's a minority but just is not like you? It's a recipe. Racism in America is a recipe for hatred everywhere.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, especially like I said, this is most vivid for me in the early '80s when I was in college in D.C. Reagan was president, and they had, remember, stuff about the welfare queens and those kind of things. Just, again, pitting one minority against another. The whole credit. Oh, it's a credit to his race. That sort of nonsense. But to your point, that sort of boomerangs back and causes self-hatred. It's like, how come I'm not a credit to my race? How come I'm not good? How come I'm not? How come I'm not? And it's just crazy. And it's just sometimes the things we don't know. Like, for instance, I went to Howard University. I didn't know anything about the paper bag rule till I got there. Like, if you were back in, when it was first started, you were darker than a brown paper bag, you couldn't get in. Like, I didn't know anything about that. Like, those are the parts of history that you got to look at and say, now they did some of that, but what part of this did we do to ourselves? Like, if we're doing the brown paper bag, I'm not going. Like, I'm not going to. I'm not stepping over, into freedom if you're still back here. Like, there was some of like, we want to do. I got to get out, sort of thing. That sort of engendered jealousy, right, between within the black community. So it was a lot of stuff, and the outside stuff that came in wasn't helpful at all. And
it's still alive. You know, light skin, dark skin,
100%.
good hair, bad hair.
Oh, absolutely.
All of that's still there, and that's self-hatred. You know, that just, your hair doesn't look good enough. Go get a weave. Here's how you need to look. So all of those things bring about self-hatred. So when you have groups of people without knowing it that are living in that and walking in that oppression, going to the store to get 4 wings from the Asian store owner, you kind of bring a certain hatred into the store without knowing it. And because they're here, whether they know it or not either, there's also a certain amount of fear, apprehension, and hatred that they're going to bring as well. We all have it here. This is a poisonous atmosphere in America. And until racism is broken and dealt with, the whole atmosphere is poisoned.
Yeah, and the issue with, I mean, we've done shows on CRT and other issues that show that there's a lot of division with regard to even talking about the issues. I mean, to your point, when we have to talk about it, well, we can't even agree what we're going to talk about. So I mean, you can't have a discussion when you're going to say, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this. Then there's no discussion to be had, right? What are you going to talk about? Because we're on completely opposite sides of the fence. We're not even coming together and saying, like, with regard to, let's say, CRT, the issue should be, okay, we're talking about the school curriculum, and so it should start there and sort of live there. It shouldn't be like some outside craziness that comes in and sort of breaks it up. Now we're talking about this or that thing that's not really related to school curriculum. And then that's where the whole thing sort of breaks down. Now, well, and then you get the name calling and 5-hour board meetings where people stand up. I mean, it's just, that's where you end up with. And then everyone goes home, but nothing is actually solved because you actually didn't talk about anything. You just screamed at each other for 3 hours. But that's sort of the world we live in. And to your earlier point about the Antichrist, anybody who is able to bring any sort of peace is going to be looked at as some kind of magical figure. Wow, those groups never got along. They never were able to break bread together and have peace. Just being able to do just a little bit of that will be enough to get people to say, that's the one. That's got to be the one.
I was having a conversation the other day with someone, and I was saying, watch and see. Because I said this a few years ago. I said, Donald Trump is going to be viewed as a great president. And you know what? As we are plunging into more chaos, I hear more people saying, you know what? If that was Trump, they would have never done that. If that were Trump, the same people that hated him, simply because this is preparing us because he could bring any amount of peace in the midst of all the upheaval that we were going through. Just because he brought a sliver of peace, I'll shut Kim Jong-un up for a moment. Putin won't do anything while I'm here. Oh, just that little bit of peace, no matter how many lies were there. People are looking back and saying, better than Biden. I'd much rather have this guy. We're there. And so we're really kind of poised and ready for people that would, under normal circumstances, blow our minds with their obvious evil, are going to be looked on as like, man, he's the best of the worst.
But the driver there is pain.
Yes.
My grocery bill's too high. I'm paying too much for gas. I'm like, my rent went through the roof. People feel pain and discomfort, and then they always like, I don't care what this guy's saying. I don't care what he's doing. If we can get the gas prices down, I'm for it. If we can get Russia to come to the table and stop bombing Ukraine, and we can get stuff going again, I'm all for it. But I don't care how that, by any means necessary. I don't care how it has to happen, but somebody's got to bring the price of a pack of bacon down. I don't care how you do it. I don't care who does it. And there is sort of this, I don't care who or how, that's going to lead to some of the things that we see in the Bible. Like people are going to say,
that's the deception, right?
I don't care. I don't care who or how, as long as it happens.
That's right. That's the deception. I mean, listen, the Antichrist is not going to come with a cloak on. We just aren't going to see the evil. What's starting in the dark is going to come to light. Evil is there. We won't see it. Because, like you said, if he fixes that economic pain, if I don't feel it at the pumps, I don't care how many girlfriends he has. Don't talk to me about what he said about Roseanne. I don't care about that. Listen, as long as, how much is tuition again? How much bread prices are what? I can buy 2 of them. Listen, let him do whatever he wants to do. And that's where the Antichrist, I suspect that people will have the signs of his evil will be there, but
Mm-hmm.
because he will bring peace that has never been seen. The signs of his debauchery will be there, but because he will be able to do in this world what has not been done, people will not see it. And I look at those people at those Trump rallies, and they didn't hear what he said. He said it, and they didn't hear. Women heard it, and they didn't, but it didn't resonate in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-mm.
And that's exactly what I suspect that last days will be like. Well, they'll say it, and it will take God to come back and say, Lord, we were deceived by it. And he'll say, no, let me roll this back. Because he said that right at the rally. And let me show a picture of you laughing at it.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to call it that, the beauty / ugliness of it is it's going to be out in the open. There's not
It's going to be out in the open.
Under the cover. Nothing in the hat, nothing up the sleeve. It's right here, right on the poster, right? He's standing right next to it. It's right there. Like, if you
Right
want to
there,
see
absolutely.
it, that's on you. But it's definitely right there. I mean, you can go on any conservative news outlet, and they can tell you how much gas was before Biden came into office. They can tell you, but and that these are all things that are true. I mean, stuff has gone up,
Right.
but there is I mean, if you want Trump again, there's a price for that outside of your grocery bill. There's a price for that outside of how much it costs to fill up your tank. So, but again, people in pain, I don't want the pain to stop. Just stop the pain. Have you
Listen, Jesus was called. Didn't they say we want Barabbas? At the end of the day, when it all came down to it, Barabbas, he scratched an itch that Jesus just wasn't scratching. He wasn't coming to bring prices. He wasn't going to overthrow the government. Barabbas wanted something that the people in their heart of hearts. I don't care how many problems. People are kicking in our doors because of him and his other guys. This is causing so many problems for us. But the fact that he does want to overthrow the Roman government, give us Barabbas over Jesus.
Yeah,
I think that we'll be in the exact same place where people will have a choice. They're going to choose the Antichrist simply because he'll scratch the internal itch.
Yeah,
That's a shame.
That's a shame, but it's the truth. I mean, we know that's what's going to happen. And we are out of time, but great conversation. I wanted to end with this last comment that we got from Willie Mays. Good one. It says, I do hope that we are continuing to pray for Kanye, because off of the meds, mental health can not only be dangerous to others, but to him as well. Absolutely. We don't mean Kanye any ill will at all. But actually, that's an excellent comment. We should continue to pray for Kanye and people around him. He has a family. I mean, he has children and ex-wife now, but there are people around him in this circle that we should be praying for him. Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
Hey, matter of fact, listen, before we leave, why don't we pray for Kanye live on the air?
Let's do it.
Awesome. You want me to pray for him?
Yeah, knock it out.
Okay. I'd be glad to do it. Let's pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, God, we just thank you right now for this opportunity to be here and even for this discussion. God, we know that this is not an accident that we're having this discussion, and we're lifting up our brother Kanye West to you right now. You are a God who answers before we call, and we know, God, that you knew this situation before we began. So, God, we just thank you that you've given us a forum to be able to go out as far and wide, to be able to lift up this prayer and to solicit others to begin to pray for him. God, we wish him no ill will. We pray that all is well with him and that you will regulate his mind. So we just bless you right now that any damage that is done from his words, that God, that you are able to fix it, turn it around, and redirect it. We just thank you again for all that you've done and what you're going to do with this podcast and how it is meant, even this night, to be a blessing to Mr. Kanye West. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
God bless you, brother.
God bless you. That's an excellent note to leave on. And I will see you next week. God bless. Thanks everyone for joining. Everyone who joined, made comments. We thank you so much. And we'll see you next week, 7 o'clock Wednesday.
Yes, sir. God bless you now.
Good night and God bless.